This is an educational video produced by Guilford Vocational Training Scheme and is intended for GP registrars. The ePortfolio is often a daunting prospect for registrars. It requires regular entry of learning logs, and these learning logs are meant to be entered in a reflective manner. The question is, what exactly is meant by meaningful reflection? It can be a concept that can be quite hard to grasp hold of, to fully understand exactly what the college are looking for and exactly how to get the best out of your writing. Reflection implies looking in a mirror and in some way analysing ourselves. One of the problems with this is not all of us like looking at ourselves, and we don't always like what we see. Even if you are happy with looking at yourself in this way, it may be that you feel you've never really been taught how to do it properly. In this video, I'm going to go over some simple do's and don'ts, which I hope will make the whole experience of reflective writing more enjoyable and in particular more worthwhile. Probably the most important thing is to find something really worth reflecting on in the first place. Without doubt, some of the most rewarding entries will be case histories. With a case history comes a person, and with a person comes a story. We've been involved in that story as their doctor, and that is what brings the case alive. And with that comes rich learning. The case you choose does not have to be something that would interest the journals. While medical rarities might be very interesting, it's often in the apparently mundane encounters with patients where we learn the most. Try to think of a case that has surprised you, or where something has caught your interest. Perhaps things didn't go quite according to plan. I remember being surprised by a man with lung cancer once. I don't remember much of the actual medical details, but I do remember that he did not want to have chemotherapy. I couldn't say I blamed him. It wasn't something I fancied either. But what really surprised me was the reason why he didn't want to have it. The thing he was really worried about was losing his hair. I'd made the assumption that a woman might worry about losing her hair, but it wouldn't matter so much for a man. In this case, I was very wrong, and it was something I needed to learn. The first thing to do, therefore, is to pick something that's interested you. Even if it's only some small aspect that's interesting, focus on that, and don't worry about detailing the rest. The first don't is simple. Don't present the case like a doctor. That sounds unfair. We are, after all doctors. But it's time to change the way we think about how we present a case. The problem we have as doctors is that we've all been very well trained in presenting cases in two specific ways. The first is the 9 o'clock ward round, and the second is how we write up a case in the notes. These are both highly efficient, objective ways of reliably transferring information about the patient's clinical condition. The problem with these two forms of communication is that they are so highly objective. They primarily answer the what questions. What happened to the patient? What did you find on examination? What do the tests show? And what's going to be the management plan? With reflective writing, we need to be allowed to be much more subjective and give our own personal take on the situation. We're more interested in the why and how questions. Why did the patient present in the way they did? Why did I make the decision I made? Why did the patient not like my plan? How do I feel about what happened? How does the patient feel? How would I do things differently next time? These are the sorts of questions that are going to be valuable in reflective writing. One useful model for reflective writing is to use the learning log a bit like you would use a personal diary. In a diary, you can explore the area that interested you in more detail. You can express what you really feel. You can ask questions without worrying about whether or not you know the answers. Or you might like to ask yourself what you would say to a friend or to your partner at the end of the day. What is it about the case that was interesting enough that you'd want to have a conversation about it? Or what is it that's still weighing on your mind that you really would like to talk to someone about it in order to mull it over more? If you can use the same sort of language in your ePortfolio, then you will really be getting to grips with reflective writing. The next thing to do is to fill in your log entries in a way that works for you, so that you don't feel obliged to fill in the form in a certain way. You might like to start your entries in the middle of the form. Probably the most important box on the form is the box marked "What did you learn?" The danger if you start from the top of the form and work your way down is that you spend all your energy describing what happened and what happened next, and by the time you get to this box, you've run out of steam. If you start with the "What did you learn?" form, then later you can go in and fill in the top two boxes, just giving enough detail to give some context to your learning. The next don't is all about warts. Oliver Cromwell famously insisted that when he was painted, he should be shown warts and all. He wasn't afraid to show off his blemishes, as he knew that all men had them. What makes someone a good doctor is not that they never make mistakes, but that they learn from their mistakes and are always interested in their own development. So make extra effort to include entries where things haven't quite gone according to plan. When you make your log entries, do think about the different competency areas, because this will help to keep them varied. It is likely that you'll have a natural bias towards some of the competency areas, for instance, making a diagnosis or clinical management, and that other areas won't come quite so naturally. It might be that you need to pay special attention towards thinking about the ethical dimensions, for instance, or community orientation. If you can get this right, then you will have a greater breadth of entries on your log, and this will help you to think more laterally and outside of the box. A secondary reason for looking at the competency areas is that this will also help your trainer. Your trainer is able to validate log entries against the competencies if you've demonstrated meaningful reflection covering that competency. Once they're validated, this can then be used in evidence for your review. We're all human and we all have busy lives, but if at all possible, don't delay putting your entries onto the ePortfolio. Memory can be a very temporary thing. If I were to ask you to write reflectively on your journey to work this morning, you'd probably have no difficulty filling a whole side of A4, remembering what the traffic was like, what the other cars were doing, what you saw along the way, or maybe the radio program you were listening to. If I were to ask you to do the same thing for a day last week, you'd probably struggle to remember it at all. Of course, there's a lot more that can be said about reflection, and in many ways it's an art that can only be developed through practice, but I hope this video has been helpful and will make your reflection more enjoyable and more rewarding. Thank you for watching.